Hello, and this is the second part of the Virtues series. I did one on feminism at my peril, and this one is on patriarchy. Now, I might say that this is actually almost a video that is almost out of its time, because I believe that this current generation might actually see a return to patriarchy. Why? Because we're faced with war, with a necessary need for people to be responsible for their actions, and I think maybe even that the next generation might actually look back at us kind of like has happened in previous eras, that people look back at the Georgian times as time of excess or gluttony, or people being too loose with women and gambling and all of that. Now, I hope that's not the case, in the sense because the 1990s to 2003 to 2007 perhaps was a time when people really did start actually having fun for a change. They got to live. After going through the 1980s and all that kind of oppressive, stern discipline, which was coupled at the same time with complete economic chaos and threat of extinction. It was like, once that era, that awful decade, 2 decades, the 1970s, 1980s, it disappeared. It was like heralded in that whole culture, which might be epitomised by, and I'm sorry if you're lost from the reference, but by sort of the Friends comedy series, Scrubs comedy series, where really men particularly were given the chance to sort of, basically, the whole term that has become now used but was never used at the time, was the whole sort of kidult thing, basically, because people were playing people in their 20s and early 30s playing computer games, and that's all very acceptable now. And there's plenty of people on YouTube in their 40s talking in elite speech. This would never have happened in the sort of, people would have found it very strange and odd that people would be playing sort of games like that, especially if you take the whole origin of the word patriarchy came from the Roman conception of the head of the household as being male and being like the disciplinarian. Now, this is a bit of a threat to certain sort of subcultures, especially, and this is why it seems so strongly put forward in America, more so than Europe, where they've got big cultural problems with, it has to be said, African Americans, who's and also a lot of white Americans as well, whose fathers basically drift away, and these same problems are in Britain as well. But the American psyche, John Wayne, those sort of people are like very strongly identified with. These are the kind of liberal, but in terms of the republic, Republican ideals. Like, they even refer to the founding fathers. Now, in my last vid, I was a bit flippant about feminism, okay? But as a bloke, I'm not really, I don't really feel like I can step into female psychology and come up with an answer. It's almost like, you know, I mean, to me, human rights and human beings' wants and passions are universal, you know. Of course, there is, of course, things to do with maternity and childcare and all the rest of that. That is specifically women's sphere of influence. But what I mentioned in a more serious issue is the fundamental way that women shape the society and their economic decisions, and they're far more serious than men are today. If you took the division of labour in a Victorian household, which are these scummy conservatives keep putting up as a herald about how brilliant the Victorian era was, and then you find out that they're a bunch of perverts in their own personal lives. Okay, and I mean that seems to be a recurring thing with Democrats in America, or and not so much the Labour Party in this country, but Democrats in America. The scandals are usually to do with money, or in Bill Clinton's case, just excess, but not. There was nothing perverted about the Monica Lewinsky thing. It was just, you know, from his point of view, you know, he had a Tony Soprano fantasy or something that of being like, you know, but of course he was president of the United States. He thought he could do what he liked. But anyway, on this whole sort of kidult issue, said feminism was probably ended by the concept by dirty socks or something. That was a bit of a joke on my part. But fundamentally, women controlled in the Victorian time took very seriously the finances in the household, and that freed them from being torn up in mill machinery and also stopped eventually. Although the Victorians were quite brutal and evil people, but it stopped child and women's labour in industrial plants to a large extent. You take the jobs that probably my great grandmother had to do would be almost the same as what my great grandfather had to do. But by the end of the Victorian era, my great grandmother would have been a typist or something like that, you know. But the reason why I think patriarchy, especially in multicultural politics, not left wing or right wing, right, because that issue's basically been solved by the social market, and Europe and America are almost the same now, you know. The whole thing, that is a threat, because if you look at the rates of intermarriage, black women are choosing white men far more, okay? The whole stereotype about the black boxer and all that or the black runner is faster and all that nonsense, which was exactly the opposite in the 1930s when white guys were winning all of the things until the basically embarrassing Adolf Hitler by Jesse Owens or whoever it was winning, like the first black guy ever. But that's all been sort of overthrown by the whole MMA and boxing thing, where you got white boxers and white MMA fighters. So the whole thing about family breakup, that in America at least, is very a black and white issue, and black women are choosing white men more and more. In Britain, probably the idea is it's the opposite way, but in actual fact, it's statistically that's the same thing, and the whole idea of limitless freedom of this kidult thing is against the whole idea of patriarchy.